everyone, and welcome to episode four. That's five. No, four. Of
episode Rik.
Episode
Yes.
Rik. Yeah.
Episode Rik. It's much easier.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode Rik, aka episode 4 of Zero FX, Zero Folks, whatever you want to call it, podcast. I am Amy Stokes-Waters. We've got the lovely Rob Lancaster with us again. So, hi, Rik. Welcome.
Hi, and thank you. It's great to be here.
Excellent. You are actually the reason why we have this podcast and why it's called Zero Fucks, I think.
Yes, it was the seed of the idea was sown in your brain by me, but It's your thing. It's your thing entirely.
What I like about that, Rik, is you have very cleverly passed off any issues that come off the back of this to us.
I only said that for legal purposes. I am strictly
Absolutely.
here as a guest. I am nothing to do.
I am not affiliated in any way whatsoever.
Yes.
And this, Amy, is how the professionals do it.
I know.
Any resemblance to persons living or dead is purely coincidental.
So I think today's topic, the evolution of cybersecurity, because as much as Rik looks like he's only 22, he has been in the industry for quite a while. And we thought it'd be interesting to get his viewpoint on kind of how cyber's changed since you have, I don't know why I'm talking about you in the third person, since you have started in the industry. So yeah, shall we talk about that?
So I started my first sort of technology job, the job that started me on the career path, was 1994. So things have changed a lot in that time. And actually, when I first started, I wasn't in security directly. I was more involved really in networking and network protocols. That was kind of where I was specializing, and software support. So actually, my first exposure to what since then became the world of cybercrime was being hit by malware in a corporate environment, but not being responsible for security or working directly in cybersecurity. So I remember 3 or 4 incidents very clearly that when you look back have become really famous bits of malware, like Melissa, Code Red, Nimda, Love Letter. One that I remember really specifically because by then I was working in security. I was working in for Network Associates, who ended up becoming McAfee. And I was in tech support there, working on PGP stuff, Gauntlet Firewall, encryption, VPNs, anything that was under the PGP umbrella. Came into work one day, anyway. God, I talk too much, don't I? I'm a shit person to have on shows like this. I came into work one day and
you talked right now. The whole point of you being here is just talk. So
I thought it was for you. I thought I was here to enable your celebrity.
You've been busted, Amy.
Yeah, it's like shit. I said that, and it was a joke. But then I thought, maybe that's a bit too close to home.
maybe that's what it is.
I came into work one day and logged in. I had like 3 different systems on my desk because it was tech support. You have to be able to simulate all these different environments that customers might have. And from none of them could I get internet access, which was really odd. But working in support, I thought, no problem. I'm the first one in the office today. I'll get it fixed before anyone else comes in. And whatever I tried to do, I couldn't get it fixed. So I called the ISP and I was saying, obviously we have a big problem. They did a bunch of investigation their end and said, nothing here. Are you sure you haven't been hit by a virus or something? And being an idiot and a bit self-important, because I was quite a lot younger, I said, you know who I work for? You know, I work for Network Associates. Of course we don't have a virus. And of course we did have a virus, and it was Blaster, because what had happened, we had a private IP range that didn't belong to corporate for testing stuff. And so we could directly connect without going through the corporate network and so on. And we had lent one of our IP addresses to a guy who worked in internal support, not customer support. And he had set up a SQL server to test, which faced directly onto the internet. And I don't remember what year Blaster was, but it was that year. And we'd forgotten that he'd done it. And of course, his SQL server had been compromised by Blaster, which was a worm. And what Blaster did was go and try and compromise every other SQL server on the planet. So it just sucked up all the bandwidth. And that's why none of us could connect. I had to go back to the ISP and eat humble pie, a lot of it, and apologize for my behavior. But actually, that was a good learning lesson as well. So yeah, back then, cybercrime really was like that. There wasn't really a financial element to it. And I don't suppose we really even called it cybercrime. It was criminal. I mean, stuff like Nimda and Code Red and all of those others were criminal. They were breaking laws with that kind of malware in some jurisdictions anyway. But there was no financial motivation. It was all about for kicks, for reputation, for laughs, for shits.
Yeah, I was going to say, what do you think the motivation of it was? Like, if it's not financial, what's...
It was, you know, that was where the cliche of, you know, the person in their parents' basement doing it by themselves, that's where that was born, because that's what it was like. You know, it wasn't a cliche then, it was real a caricature maybe, but it was relatively true one. So they were people testing their abilities and doing stuff for fun, and it had been that way kind of since the beginning. But it was only when organized crime looked at what was happening and then went, what are the possibilities for us here? How could we use this? That really, beginning of 21st century, I suppose, it really started to kick off in a criminal way, and it hasn't stopped growing since. And obviously,
do you think that's when the kind of cyber industry as a whole kind of kicked off as well, and when it became kind of more financially motivated? Because I'm presuming if it's become when it became financially motivated, it kind of, like you said, took off. So there's a lot more of it going on.
The industry exploded then, for sure. And it was funny to watch that happen as somebody who was already in the industry by then, because the big players are older. I mean, Trend Micro, I think, was founded in 1988. They'll kill me if I got that wrong. I think it was founded in 88. We're old. You know, we're one of the dinosaur in terms of age.
Excuse me, I was born in 89. You're not that old.
89, okay.
No, I was born in 89. You're not that old.
Oh, I was born in 1970.
Ooh, yeah, you are that old.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm older than him.
There you go. See, I'm
Thanks
not
a lot, Amy.
You're welcome.
So, and back then it was Trend Micro, Symantec, which was born really out of their success came through the acquisition of Norton. And it was Network Associates, of which McAfee was a part. Obviously, McAfee existed before Network Associates, but they were kind of the big three. And then the other players have also been around for a significant amount of time that were kind of, like, you call them tier 2 vendors, I suppose, like Sophos, like Bitdefender, like F-Secure, all of those slightly smaller companies.
Yeah.
But then there definitely was an explosion because there was an explosion in criminal innovation. There had to be a corresponding explosion in innovation among defenders, because criminals continue to find new and interesting ways to compromise people and systems. And so you need to continue to find new and interesting ways to stop that happening.
Yeah, it's like the cyber arms race, isn't it?
Yeah. And you see, and I talk absolute shit sometimes, but here I go again. When I think about the industry, it makes me think of physics about the universe. Certain theories about the universe, anyway. One of them is that the universe comes from Big Bang, expands to a certain point, and then collapses back in on itself again, and then there's another Big Bang, and it's forever doing this. And that, whenever I've thought about our industry, it's in those terms, because that's what seems to happen, is that you start from almost a singularity of consolidated vendors and abilities. There's this explosion of innovation in different areas. We've seen host intrusion prevention. We've seen DLP as a technology. That's my Jack Russell. Loads of different kinds of technologies throughout our industry. And then there's this huge wave of acquisitions as the bigger players buy up those capabilities rather than develop them themselves, and it all gets consolidated again, and then something else happens, and there's another explosion of abilities and techniques. And our industry is continually doing this.
What do you think where are we now then?
Cloud's been a big one for the last, for us, we started, we decided to make as a company, a big financial bet on needing to have protection for cloud all the way back in 2008. But arguably for just over a decade, the whole industry has been focused on that. Yeah. And that was accelerated by the pandemic as well, because a lot of organizations had to really, step change their plans for cloud migration and availability of internal things externally as they pushed all their workforce to being more remote. Yeah. Out of necessity. So that really accelerated that. So right now there's a lot of innovation around cloud, because cloud itself continues to evolve. 10 years ago, if we were talking about cloud, it was infrastructure as a service, and you were talking about VMware mostly. But now, we've gone through platform as a service and software as a service, and has evolved not just to encompass things like Salesforce or Office 365, Google Apps or whatever, but to also encompass things like AWS Lambda, to have truly serverless environment where the only thing that you provision as a customer is your code. And then the huge challenge for the security industry is then, oh shit, how do we do security as code? Yeah. Because we can't ask them to deploy anything in this environment because there's nowhere to deploy it to. It has to be as code, it has to be built in. So there's a lot of innovation around there. And I think SIM technologies are kind of beginning to fall by the wayside as stuff like XDR takes over as well. And that started with just a couple of vendors, but it's becoming very, very big as a part of the industry now, XDR propositions and capabilities. I think the analysts now have dedicated XDR analyst researchers and magic circles, or whatever they call their publications. Stepping on no trademarks with that. Magic circles is a good one. We should trademark that.
We should
have the Zero FX magic circle, which would go with the magic circle around the FX, which is rotating in front of my eyeballs.
There we go. That was
it's the magic circle. And the other one, which is borderline between, it's a lot of marketing hype and it's actually something really useful, is zero trust. Yeah. There are a lot of people talking about zero trust out there, particularly from a sales and marketing perspective. There are not very many real technologies that are sort of, born in zero trust, if you like. There are a lot of retrofitted things, but zero trust as a concept, I think, is an unavoidable destination for security right now. Eliminating trust from your infrastructure is the only sensible response to the evolution of cybercrime and attack techniques. And having a zero trust mindset is definitely the right way to architect your forward-facing security. But like most things, it's abused by marketing, right? It's abused by sales, like most things.
I think my experience of zero trust is like the Microsoft zero trust story, which I think is probably quite a mature one because they've been talking about it for quite a while. But I'm not sure, like you said, how much of it's kind of retrofitted into some of the products that they've got as well, like AAD.
Yeah, and it's conceptual retrofitting as well, because Active Directory is definitely a part of Microsoft's zero trust story, and most other vendors who want to do something with zero trust, and almost every organization who wants to do something with zero trust is going to be using AD. It's a question of making sure that the implementation of it fully fits that elimination of trust mindset, because AD in its current form doesn't really meet that criteria. But nevertheless, that's how authentication works right now. And our hands are vaguely tied by the tools that are on offer.
Yeah, definitely. I think the other thing that would be interesting to talk about is your view on artificial intelligence, because I did a panel the other week on AI, and I read your Project 2030 document to understand what the fuck was going on, because I don't really know why I got asked to do the panel on AI, but I said yes to it anyway because that's me.
Good.
And then I pretty much plagiarized all of Rik's research when I spoke about it. Don't give me that face, Mr. Ferguson. It's
I did not hear that.
publicly available information. So yeah, I spoke quite extensively around AI. But I think your thoughts on it, which were my thoughts, are really interesting.
So I mean, AI is massive as a field. I mean, it's obviously not restricted just to security. The current emergency use case for AI in our field is in a SOC type environment, without a shadow of a doubt. That's where it's going to deliver the most immediate bang for the buck. Actually, I wrote some figures down. Let me find them, because I was fairly sure this thing was going to come up. Because one of the things, because I tweeted an interview that Tech Decisions did with me, which they published yesterday. So I tweeted out, and it brought this back to top of mind, because one of the things, the big thing that interview was about the human pipeline problem, like too many open positions, not enough people to fill the positions, which I take a contrary viewpoint on to that, but that's not the question you asked me. But the reason it brought this to mind is because actually our problem in cyber, I think anyway, our problem is not a human pipeline problem. It's a data pipeline problem, because even if we continue to throw bodies at jobs in information security, the pipeline of incoming data to deal with is only ever increasing. It's not a problem we're going to fix just by throwing bodies at it.
Yeah.
So I was looking for numbers that justified that perspective. And the truth is, there's no way that the typical security operations center of today, even right now, is staffed to the levels required to deal with the information that is being delivered to that function. I found a report which was back in 2017, so it only gets worse at the moment. But it was a report of just the financial sector, but again, I think it's widely applicable in other verticals. 60% of banks that responded to this study by Ovum said that they routinely dealt with more than 100,000 alerts a day in their SOC.
A day?
Yeah, 100,000 plus. 60% of the financial institutions, 100,000 plus alerts per day to deal with. So I thought that sounds like a big number, but how does that impact people? Takes about 25 minutes per alert to do the triage. You might have, you find out it's a false positive. You might need to downgrade it. You might need to upgrade it. You've got to do a certain amount of like upfront triage on the alerts that come in, right? Yeah. So if it's 25 minutes per alert for 100,000 alerts, then you have 41,667 hours of work to do in a 24-hour period, which means that in your SOC, you need 1,736 people just to do the triage.
And that's what 24 hours a day.
So it's like that for me, that's the super quick win where AI needs to be really laser focused right now, is how do we hand all that stuff, the 25-minute jobs, off to the greatest extent possible to automation.
And I think I used to sell, obviously, I used to sell a lot of Microsoft products, and their Sentinel solution is backed by a lot of AI, because that helps to be alerts now. But I think the reason why that works is because it's connected to, if you've hooked it up to like the XDR solution that Microsoft's got, and you've hooked it up to the authentication solution, and you've hooked it up to the network monitoring, and you've hooked it up to all of the other things that kind of have to feed into it, then it can use the AI to kind of understand what that alert really means, whether it's a false positive or not. But if you've just got a scene there,
that's why SIM is under pressure from XDR in general in the industry, because the SIM was relatively noisy and relatively, I don't want to say underdeployed, underdeveloped in terms of its capabilities. It could have gone so much further and really never appeared to, and XDR has kind of stolen a march on that. Because in security, context is king. The more you know about everything that surrounds any given alert or event, the more accurate your decision is going to be based on the data that you have, because you have that context. And like you say, the more things you can hook it up to, and whether it's, whether you're using, whichever vendor you're using, it doesn't really matter, as long as you can take feeds from multiple different sources that contextualize what's happening, right, and let you make decisions based on the context that you have. And then when it comes to investigations and threat hunting as well, actually the other side of the coin, it simplifies all of that, because if you have an event which is a detonation of a payload, that's the end of the chain. So you need to trace that back and do root cause analysis and find patient zero and all that kind of stuff. If you don't have the context, the lateral movement, the patch levels, the vulnerability exposure, the misuse of accounts, the misuse of lol bins, so you can track lateral movement across the estate, you're never going to be successful. But what AI will do, if we can get it into that triage function, is a lot of people are, oh, well, what happens to the SOC then? All those people are going to have no purpose in life anymore. Absolutely untrue. What it's going to do is elevate all of those people, because it takes all that donkey work away and it lets you become be more focused and develop your expertise in that field without all the shit that leads to burnout.
Yeah,
I
got asked to be on a panel the other day about whether SOC would be replaced by AI, like whether the SOC, like the entire SOC, would be replaced by AI. But they were looking for someone that was going to say yes. And I was like, I don't think you're going to find anyone that is going to say, yeah, we're going to replace our entire SOC with artificial intelligence, because that, A, it sounds risky. B, I don't think the technology is there yet, like by any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah.
And I just thought, yeah, that's just a bit of, I think it's just a bit too much of a wild, like.
I reckon if you looked hard enough, you could probably find a vendor that would say that.
Yeah.
Because there's always one.
Yeah, probably, yeah.
But that's about it.
Yeah, I think the thing that, like what you were saying there about allowing people to actually focus on what they need to focus on, because like you were saying, the amount of hours that's actually needed in the SOC just to do the triaging, that doesn't include the hours, like you said, to do the investigation, to do any remediation work.
And that's the interesting and important stuff, right? I mean, that's obviously you need the signals, but the more that you can automate your signals intelligence, if you want to call it that, then the more effective your investigation and root cause analysis and remediation, because that's what it's all about at the end of the day. Yeah. It's not just about finding out what went wrong. It's about making sure it doesn't go wrong again. The more time you have to do that, the healthier your organization, the better the risk posture of your organization, and the more agile you become from a security perspective. You can move more quickly and you can help your organization to do more, because I don't think any of us, well, with the exception of, I suppose me, because I work for a security vendor, but very few people work for organizations whose job is security. The organization's job is brewing beer or whatever. Right? I don't know why that came to mind first. But it's about making sure you can brew better beer more quickly. That's what your security job is about. It's not about doing security at the end of the day.
No, and I thought that was an interesting point you were saying a minute ago as well, about being more proactive and doing threat hunting rather than reacting to situations, which I think is a lot of organizations, because they're that bogged down, like you said, with all these alerts coming in, and they haven't got time to do the like run of the mill things that they need to do with security, like patching policies in a lot of places aren't even up to date. So there's no way on earth that people can be proactively going out there and threat hunting and looking for holes within their systems. I mean, that's why they employ like pen testers, I'm guessing, like what I do. I mean, I don't do that, I sell it. But yeah, that's kind of like, you have to rely on outsourcing that kind of thing, because you haven't physically got the time, because you're spending so much time like plugging holes and, yeah, like you said, looking at alerts that are not.
For me, there's a big difference between the threat hunting and the pen testing side of things. There's a really strong argument for pen testing being external, because anytime you've been involved in the conception, design, installation, and maintenance of a thing, there is a strong possibility you'll never see its weaknesses or its blind spots, because it's your baby, right? You designed it, you built it, and you're the best in the world, so nothing's wrong with it.
It's like reading your own document. When you read your own document, you don't see all the spelling mistakes in it, do you?
Yeah, totally that. And that, so for me, there's a really strong argument for having other people look at your stuff. But for threat hunting, there's a very strong argument for having that internal. At least a large part of that expertise internal, because you have the context. It's your organization, it's your business processes, It's your business vertical. You know what threat intelligence is most important to you. You have contacts with other people within your particular industry where you might share intelligence. So there's a strong argument for the threat hunting stuff being more internal focused, but the pen testing stuff being like a second opinion.
Yes.
So,
Rob, you're being very quiet. Have you got any thoughts on this?
This is an issue that, okay, with hindsight, it was obvious that this was going to come about. But actually, we didn't even need hindsight to see this was going to be an issue, because the cybersecurity industry is a development of the physical security industry within a very different sector. But when people first put locks on doors, baddies went through windows, and then they put locks on windows, and baddies worked out a way of jimmying locks on doors or windows. So it's evolutionary. It's very easy to move on to the next stage. Why did cybersecurity, and this is very unfair, but why, when stuff is being developed, was it not being developed with an eye to the worst possible people out there, as opposed to the gaps being created?
Silos. That was the problem for years, Rob, and to a certain extent, even what we were just talking about, SOCs is a reflection of that today. A SOC is still a silo within a business, and I kind of have issues with a SOC being bolted onto an organization. There are more integrated ways to do that, but that's the way that security came about and has existed since its inception, is that it was stuck onto the rest of the business, and businesses continue to operate in silos. Before I came to Trend, which was a long time ago now, admittedly, but in this particular space, I don't think that much has changed that quickly. I was working at a systems integrator who doesn't exist anymore. They were called EDS. They're part of HP now. And I was a security and privacy architect there. So I was responsible for designing the security for various, mostly government or law enforcement type systems. And what amazed me, and I went there from a vendor. So I was in tech support at McAfee, and I'd gone to be an architect at EDS. What amazed me when I got to EDS was the extent to which silos and commercial interest were embedded within business process, and it was the root cause of a lot of failure. For example, the endpoint security system of choice of EDS. I think I can say all this without fear because they don't exist anymore. The endpoint security system of EDS was one particular software vendor, and you were not allowed to recommend anything other than that one of choice unless the customer had specifically asked you for something else. So even if you, the security professional and architect, felt that wasn't up to the job in this instance for whatever reason, you couldn't suggest anything else because of commercial pressure. So that was the commercial thing. And then the silo thing was everybody operated in dedicated and discrete teams. There was, for example, the application development team. There was the desktop infrastructure team. There was the server infrastructure team. There was the network infrastructure team, and there was the security team. And it was almost like it was a process that things would be developed and passed down. So you would have the network infrastructure being built. It would be passed then to the server infrastructure team, who had somewhere they could put their servers. And then the endpoint infrastructure team would design their stuff on to connect to those servers and where it would go and how it would be put together. And then finally, it would all be given to the security and privacy team, and people would say, right, secure that.
I think that's a massive issue, because you end up retrofitting the security into the products then, and then it's never quite right. Whereas I think security needs to be starting to be seen as like a business-wide function. So like HR is, or like IT usually is. It kind of services every area of the organization. So it shouldn't just be, like you said, a bolt-on service at the end. But I mean, a lot of organizations do that now. When we get asked to pen test, it's because someone sat and developed an app, they've released it and then gone, shit, let's have a look at that and see whether there's anything wrong with it. Whereas I keep trying to say to customers, if you get as involved in the software development lifecycle, and when you're releasing Delta changes, we'll just give it a quick once over, because it will take a lot less fucking time than to do an entire app test. and B, you'll be bolting in the security as you're going. So if you've made a little change, then we can have a look at that like teeny tiny bit of code or whatever it is that you've written and make sure that there's no holes in it. And
this is something that security automation and orchestration has really evolved to attempt to solve. And it's also kind of the headspace that DevOps has evolved out from. And obviously, love or hate the name, DevSecOps is becoming an important thing as well, where it is still an iterative process, but it is it's that figure eight, it's an infinite loop process where each of those functions is embedded into the process, and there is cross communication at all points. So that from a security perspective, for example, if you're building an app, then you need to be able to look at the security of the build and the security of the process. You need to be able to look at the security of any external libraries that you're pulling into your code build. You need to look for vulnerabilities once the build process has been complete. You might want different security rules based on whether that built thing is in testing or if it's in deployment. You'll certainly want different response rules based on those different things. You'll need to check configurations, make sure that you're not embedding things like passwords and keys within things as they get deployed. Make sure that stuff that contains that kind of thing doesn't get pushed to production. And obviously you need then to secure the things that are in production. And all of those teams, development, security, and operations, need to be working as one, which is what DevSecOps and DevOps is really all about. It's not a technology; it's more of a philosophy. It's a way of working. And so there definitely are developments which are really positive that have come about to address the problems caused by silos. But there is so much technical debt within organizations because people have taken short-term decisions because it's the path of least resistance. And then that's where you start to accrue interest on your technical debt, which will come back to bite you at the end of the day. It's funny when you think about the ease with which now it's possible to circumvent all of those silos anyway. I'm thinking to that network team, server team, desktop team, but you look at how organizations do business now. All you need as a marketing department or as a research department to extend your organization's perimeter into the cloud is a credit card, and no one's going to know that you've done it. You go and spin up your own little environment in AWS, you populate it with a bunch of internal data, you misconfigure it, and there it is in an S3 bucket exposed to the world. And the security department, the IT department, nobody even knew that existed outside of the team that decided to do so. So I mean, as ever, there are strong arguments, but they only get stronger for integration, automation, and discovery, automation of discovery as well, because discovery is one of the key things that attackers are doing now. That's one of the key changes in the cybersecurity landscape, is that it's not that shotgun, scattergun approach of like fire out as much spam as possible and maybe I'll get a few clicks and that'll result in a few infections.
There is a lot of that about. I was watching, I can't remember what that crap program is that comes on BBC at like 10 a.m. It's like Crime Watch. Crime Watch or something like that. It's not bad.
Celebrities buy antiques with other people's money or something like that.
Yeah, something like that. No, it's like Crime Watch, but they always have like a section on about cybercrime. But all of the time, every single cybercrime that they're talking about is literally a spray and pray.
Yeah.
Here's a Royal Mail text message that you might have received. Here's a DPD message you might have received. And it's always the same stuff every morning. But I think the fact that it's on TV all the time, people must be clicking on it. And people must be getting done over by it.
Yeah, it's always somebody's first day online. Every day it's a whole bunch of people's first day online. Or it's the first time they've had their own email account, or it's the first time they connected to Twitter or some other social media, right? Every day there are, God knows what number, but some unimaginable number of people who it's their first day. So that stuff will always continue to work. But if you look at threat reports over the last 2-3 years, things like ransomware is probably the best example, but it's indicative of a wider trend. It has massively narrowed its sights and it is hugely professionalized. It used to be very automated spray and pray, consumer-facing threat. But now it is highly researched. A whole new industry of initial access vendors or access as a service has sprung up, because the world of cybercrime is this whole world of niche vendors and niche services. It's not like one person is responsible for our evil and they do everything to do with every campaign. They buy services from other criminal vendors, whether that's crypting or packing or botnet services, or our evil is delivered through other Trojans, for example. So different criminal gangs will cooperate on a commercial basis.
Yeah.
But it's a highly specialized thing. So now if you want to get into a certain company, you will approach an initial access vendor or an access as a service vendor, and you will ask for access to that company, and in all likelihood they'll have it. If they don't have it, they'll attempt to get it for you, and then you just have valid credentials and off you go. And it becomes then human versus human, not human versus really dumb automated spray and pray malware. Because when it's human versus human, the attacker is in, they can take their time, they can be low and slow, they can live off the land, they can use PowerShell, they can use Mimikatz, all of the lol bins and not quite malicious tools like Cobalt Strike against you. To spend time exploring and mapping out your infrastructure, to identify assets of interest and of value, to exfiltrate those first before triggering the encryption, because now we're seeing not just ransomware, but we're seeing double, triple, even quadruple extortion from a single ransomware attack, which is like the first level of extortion is pay us money and we'll give you your data back. The second level is, if you don't pay us money, we're going to start leaking your data, and more gangs have jumped on that. The triple extortion is, as well as that, by the way, in this data is all of your customer data. So we're going to start contacting them as well, either to extort them directly or to use them as leverage to get you to pay up. And the fourth level that is becoming increasingly popular is to throw a complementary denial of service attack on top of that. But it's all ways to get you to pay the ransom. And actually, if you look at an example, a recent example, JBS Meats, I think it was JBS.
Yeah,
they ended up paying 11 million in ransom, but actually when they paid that ransom, the vast majority of their systems had already been recovered. They were paying the 11 million because of the secondary leverage of not exposing their data. And attackers are definitely looking at that now and saying, well, that's probably our biggest lever, is the fact that we have the data, not that we've encrypted the data.
That's what I always think about when people pay the ransom, though, and I'm like, well, I know why people pay the ransom, and I'm not judging companies that have to do that because of whatever reason. But I always think you're giving money to criminals, like, just because they've said, give us 11 million quid, and then that's it, we'll go away. Well, they're not. Why would you trust them?
Because weirdly, it's an industry that's built on trust, isn't it? Ransomware. It's an odd
zero trust approach to ransomware.
But the thing is, their whole business model thrives on trust, because if they break your trust as a victim, right? If they break your trust, you pay them, and then you don't get a decryption key, which is how that was the initial business model. Then nobody will ever pay any ransomware ever again. It breaks the whole business model if you take the trust out. You have to, as a victim, trust that your attacker will give you what they promise when you hand over your money. And if it becomes demonstrable that that's not happening, then nobody will pay any ransoms to anyone anymore. So they had to keep that trust up. And the same thing is true about leaked data. If it becomes apparent that you pay someone not to leak your data and then your data is leaked, that the leverage that you get from that threat goes away as well. So the whole business model, ironically, is built on trust.
Which we will come back to after the news.
Okay, here's the news. The Internet Archive has launched a campaign against tech regulation by setting up a way forward machine. semi-parodying its famous Wayback Machine archiving site. The Way Forward machine paints a picture of the internet in 2046, smeared with censorship, governmental interference, and more. When a user types in any well-known address, they are presented with a number of pop-ups, all of which suggest a nightmarish future where governmental surveillance reigns supreme and privacy is heavily frowned upon. It's like China and Facebook made a baby together. In scumbag news, a malware peddler has created a fake website posing as Amnesty International to serve gullible victims with software that claims to protect users against Pegasus malware. Preying on fears about this critical mobile bug, this development takes the usual evolution of malware download laws and picks a particularly nasty vector, tapping into the market for protection against advanced threats. Stay vigilant, as this supposed protection is actually a rat. Incidentally, so is the guy that created it. And finally, IKEA has removed hidden security cameras from its warehouse in Peterborough after their employees spotted one in the ceiling void whilst using the toilet. Workers at the flat pack furniture giant were concerned that they may have been spied on while in the bathroom. The discovery was made when the lights were switched off. A member of staff spotted what appeared to be a small red light between the panels of a suspended ceiling. Upon further investigation, multiple hidden cameras were found in both the men's and ladies' bathrooms. Whoever thought this was a good idea was definitely missing a few screws.
Starting in the southwest, the rather unusually warm weather we've had is resulting in a growing area of high pressure around Exeter. Nothing to do with the weather, that's just on the roads. Historically, of course, this is mining country, so keep an eye out for adventurous types wearing head torches. Moving on up into the Midlands, we see thick cloud cover, no precipitation to speak of, just badly named products and poorly designed user interfaces. The picture changes as we move further east. Keep an eye out for sin flooding, especially in low-lying areas. More or less the same picture moving north, though obviously wetter, colder, and different accents. Don't expect too much change as we move into the weekend. Expect patches of sunshine and broken cloud with the occasional shower. Misty in the mornings and, of course, a high chance of ransomware. Thank you.
So we've talked about where things are. I'm very interested to know. Actually, I've got two questions for you, Rik. And I'm going to ask them both because then there's a chance that you might answer them both. If I ask one, you'll just run away with that answer and I won't ever get the question in.
I'm the worst guest. Nobody will ever invite me on anything ever again.
I don't think you or I need to worry about that. So my two questions are this. Question number one is, what do you see the future looking like from a cybersecurity perspective? And my second question is, if you were in a position to start all over again, if we were to say today cybersecurity exists, how would we implement it in such a way that we weren't on the back foot?
My answer to the second question is I would learn to play the guitar properly and go and be a guitarist. My answer to the second question.
Fair enough. I can't argue with that.
So we just finished, Amy mentioned it earlier on, the Project 2030 thing, which actually we released the research paper for. I have to full disclosure here, they've asked me to leave more gaps when I talk so that I can be edited.
That could well come back to bite you, Mr. Ferguson.
We released the research paper Project 2030 for RSA. Myself and Vic Baines worked on and published Project 2030, which was like a successor to a previous project which we had published in, or which had been published in 2013, Project 2020, which was a forward-looking project under the auspices of ICSPA, an organization called ICSPA, who I don't think are around anymore, but led primarily by Europol, which I had been asked to be involved with. And we published that in 2013, trying to anticipate what the world of 2020 might look like, and what the possible criminal opportunities might be.
You were surprisingly accurate, I think, as well, weren't you?
We did a review. I was going to say, when 2020 came around, we said, okay, let's look at Trend Micro. We said, let's look at Project 2020, which I said wasn't our own publication, but we were involved in it, and let's see how good that was. So we published a review of 2020, and it was surprisingly accurate. Well, I say surprisingly. Actually, Vic and I would quite often be messaging each other in the intervening 7 years between 2013 and 2020, and go, "Oh, look, here's another news story, which is one of those predictions." You could watch it coming true piece by piece, which was very cool.
Yeah.
And of course, we decided then that we would do it again. So now we're looking at 2030. How might technology and society develop, and what might the criminal opportunities be as a result of that development? And it's a really interesting proposition. So what we've done is same as with 2020, we set the whole thing in a fictional nation state of Nusan, Japan, because it allows us to take every possible credible advance and put it all in one place, because it means then you can identify interdependencies between those different things and linkages and points of acceleration or delay, and be much more flexible and accurate in your predictions. And there were a few things that really stood out in terms of technology drivers that surfaced through. So we had to do a few things. We had to establish a baseline, and the key thing for us about establishing the baseline was looking at reports by organizations like Interpol, like Europol, like the United Nations, their sort of current state of the world reports when it comes to technology and cyber. And then we looked at the 12-month forward-looking things that are published by all the cybersecurity vendors every year to kind of get an idea of where the weight of industry opinion lay. And then we did a lot of horizon scanning of technical publications, patent applications, news stories, and then kind of set ourselves.
You actually put real life research into it. Then it's not just like shit you've made up in your head. You've like
no. We fully the methodology and stuff as well. Yeah, it was, and that was part of the reason for doing the review of 2020, because we reviewed the methodology as well as the outcome and said, does this methodology stand up? Can we use this framework to do another thing, or what bits do we need to improve? So yeah, it's scientific research, but it's also, it's future thinking, it's futurism. So there's a lot of imagination required. Yeah. And actually, what was also really apparent as Vic and I were chatting through it is that we had to continually restrain ourselves. I remember one of the things that would frequently come up is, no, we're talking about 2030 here, not 2050, because it's so easy to expect things to happen too quickly. But then you think about some of the things that we do talk about. The key drivers that emerged out of that baselining activity were, one of the biggest was definitely the impact of AI, in particular natural language processing and generative adversarial networks, the deep X technology stuff that we see today.
Me and you talked a little bit about natural language processing, didn't we, when I was pestering you for help with this AI panel? And I thought it was really interesting that we were talking about the fact that people won't necessarily need to be able to code or do anything kind of technical, because you'll have a machine there and you can just say, go and find all of the entry points into financial services institutions in London. And because it understands that natural language and the AI technology that's kind of there, then it can go and do that.
And it's so that's some of the stuff from the criminal possibilities with AI that we mentioned in the report, is that it's twofold really. One of the primary and probably earliest uses of AI from a criminal perspective will be in obfuscation and evasion. It's a natural evolution of things like fast flux botnets and things where criminals are doing all that they can so that it's difficult to attribute activities to individual threat actors, to individual geographies, and to obfuscate detection and to evade capture, basically those things. So AI will definitely play a huge role in that.
Pen testing as an industry itself is going to have to work out how it keeps up with that kind of thing, though, isn't it? Because if threat actors have got that kind of technology, then we're going to have to be able to expose where all of those entry points are that an artificial intelligence solution can find. So,
yeah, and the thing with AI is it's not constrained to acting and thinking in a human way. So at the moment, when you are pen testing or when a threat actor is attempting to gain access or execute a payload or whatever, it's still human versus human or human versus defenders technology in one way or another. The threat is operating at human speed, but more importantly, it's using human thought processes and human logic. As soon as you allow an AI to take over, chances are it would still want to operate at human speed, because the very fact that it's operating at machine speed would be a massive red flag, right? So it would have to slow itself down to not identify itself. But it wouldn't have to think in the same way that a human thinks. So it would be all the things that we've learned to identify as indicators of lateral movement, for example, might begin to look completely different, even unrecognizable. And my favorite way to express that is to think of the banana, right? Which sounds, but think of the banana as a human.
As you rock it already today, Rick. We don't need to talk about bananas.
With a banana, right? As a human, when you hand, in most cases, a human a banana, they'll see the stalk bit on the end, and to a human brain, you go, "Oh, that looks like a handle. I'm going to open it with the handle." But it's actually the least efficient way to open a banana. And if you hand a banana to a monkey who has a totally different thought process, they don't even look at the handle other than perhaps as a handle to hold on, but they just squeeze it at the other end and it pops open nice and easily. That's the difference between, if you constantly approach something with a human mindset, your AI adversary will not be acting in that way, and you won't see the things that your AI adversary is doing. But on the flip side of that, on the more positive side, here's a gap. On the more positive side, it means that the threat actors themselves won't necessarily understand what their AI technology is doing or why, because it's relatively incomprehensible. One of the defining characteristics of AI is a lot of the time we don't know why it makes the decisions that it makes, the thought process behind it. We just know that it works. That's kind of a problem, if you like, with AI, that getting under the hood of it. So if attackers themselves don't understand how or why the tools they're using are working, it may offer unforeseen opportunities for disruption, whether that's law enforcement disruption or whether that's technology disruption. There was a great thing about an AI-assisted autonomous vehicle, and the car was driving along the road, and at some point it would have great difficulty in identifying where the road was. Most of the time it was fine, but then at other times it was having really great difficulty staying on the tarmac. And the question was, well, why is that happening? Why is this failing? And it took a very long time to work out that the AI that was making those decisions had decided that if it had grass on one side, then the thing on the other side was road. But it got into great difficulty when there's no more grass, because that was the thing it was using as its determining factor, because that's how it had taught itself. And it's being able to unravel those learning decisions that's a bit of a problem in certain models.
I'm personally very disappointed that Project 2030 isn't basically the film iRobot.
Well, it's a film, though. It's a film. Look at these. This is the script for the actors. And it's I don't even know if it's total page count. No, it doesn't have a total page count, but this is all the text for the whole entire series of 9 episodes. And this even bigger document, this is the shot list. So this is every camera shot for every scene.
Ooh, previews.
There you go. And we have done 9 episodes, and each episode is currently longer than we wanted it to be, but I think it's really good. So I don't think they're going to get much shorter. They're about 8 or 9 minutes each. So if you put that together, we've effectively made a feature film. We're just breaking it up into small pieces.
And there's
November this year. November.
And there's all of Rik's Oscars in the background from previous.
A lot of those are from video work. Most of them are from video work, actually.
Oh, I know.
There's a few that aren't. So this one, this is the best one. This is the show-off one. This dolphin
from Cannes.
Cannes Film Festival.
Yeah, that was for one of the interactive games that we made, Data Center Attack game. But this is a Telly Award. This is a Telly Award. This is a Telly Award. There's a Vega Award. I mean, there's a lot, and hopefully we'll.
He says I'm using him to further my own celebrity, but clearly, Rik's the biggest celeb going.
I think this could possibly be the pinnacle of our series.
We'll win awards. Let's submit it for some awards.
We have got Dave Kennedy on next week, so you know.
Well, there you go. See, I'm just a warm-up act. What can I say?
Oh,
that's funny. Yeah, so I think this has been a very interesting conversation. What
has
else?
Indeed.
Yeah, what else do we need to talk about? You're gonna have to edit this bit out anyway, because I don't know what we're talking about now. Because Rik distracted me with shiny things.
You distracted you with shiny things.
Yes, you're a magpie, except of course that's not what magpies do. But aside from that, you are a magpie.
I know. I got told that I distract and derail things all the time.
Do you have that thing? I pick up stupid things from friends and acquaintances sometimes. So now whenever I see a single magpie, I have to say out loud, "Hello, Mr. Magpie. How's Mrs. Magpie?" Every single time I see a single magpie, I say that out loud.
As a result of my children, I have to salute a single magpie.
The magpie salute.
And then almost immediately see a second magpie, which means I've ruined it. And I do, unfortunately, now every time I'm driving, even if I'm driving on my own, have to shout out "yellow car" every time I see a yellow car.
Brilliant.
I have to shout "sheeps" if I see sheeps.
I used to have to call them clouds on sticks for quite a long time.
My brother thought, like power cooling towers. The cooling towers are power stations. My brother thought they were cloud machines.
Cloud factories.
Yeah.
We have them here in Warsaw.
Anyway, we've totally derailed now. What we're going to talk about for 10 more minutes? Do we need anything else? Or should we have a final thought? What do you think, Mr. Lancaster?
This has been so far, one of our most fascinating talks, and it's been wonderful to hear from you, Rik. So thank you for joining us. Could you perhaps give us a final thought that we could take away?
Yes, I can give you a final thought. And I was thinking of my final thought just as you were requesting my final thought. And my final thought is this. Go and get the company that you work for to sign up for Respect and Security, because it's a really important initiative that will go some way towards correcting the toxic parts of the culture within the information security industry. That's my final thought. Go and do that. It would be very, very good. We launched earlier this year. Our target was to have 50 companies signed up by the end of this year. We hit that target in a week, less than a week, 6 days. And the people signing up, the requests to sign up haven't stopped coming in since then. So it's exceeded beyond our wildest expectations, but it still has a very long way to go. So my final thought is that go and get your employer, or if you are the employer, go and sign up for, on an organizational basis, Respect and Security.
I think that's an excellent final thought. Thank you for finally thinking it.
Brilliant thought.
Next week, we will have the lovely Dave Kennedy. But for now, we have been Amy and Rob, and you have been Rik Ferguson. Thank you very much for coming, and we will see you all soon.
Bye.